Hi, it's Thursday, August 21st, and we're tracking several systems still in the Atlantic today. We've got Hurricane Erin just off the U.S. coast. The system is now making its right-hand turn into the northern Atlantic, but we still have tropical storm warnings in effect for Bermuda and the U.S. East Coast, as we still have some impacts being brought to those areas. We've got Invest 90L, a tropical wave nearing the northern Caribbean islands. This has been forecast to track northwest over the next few days and is likely to become the next named storm as it tracks north and might threaten Bermuda after Erin departs in the North Atlantic. We've also got Invest 99L here in the central tropical Atlantic. This system has a very short window today of where it could become a brief tropical depression or storm, but environmental conditions are about to get rather unfavorable for the system's development. And really, for long-term interest, this is not going to be all too much to watch, especially for the Windward Islands. Really, the only impact you could expect from this is impacts that you normally feel from a tropical wave that comes through during hurricane season. Remains to be seen if we have to watch this way down the line, if it tries anything in the Western Caribbean or gets further northwest from that. That's a long-term thing. If that does happen, we'll talk about that when it happens. But for now, nothing much to discuss with Invest 99L. There's also another area of low pressure here. Hard to see on this map, but it's a compact area of low pressure in the central Atlantic, which environmental conditions are about to get also for this system rather unfavorable for development, but it's possible today that we see a brief TC form out of this, but it's in the middle of nowhere, impacting nobody, so we have no reason to discuss it. Okay, we're going to briefly start with the stuff on Hurricane Erin. This is a closer look at it. It is now making that northeastward turn, as we talked about for the past several days, into the North Atlantic. But you can see the large size of this hurricane and the amount of impact that this is still bringing to the U.S. and Bermuda. We're still getting some water rises along the mid-Atlantic coast, and that will continue throughout the day today. We could still see some coastal flooding and storm surge. The worst of that will likely be in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, where we could still see some 2 to 4 feet rises above normally dry ground, and we do still have a storm surge warning in place for that. Now, Bermuda, we did have in the latest advisory a tropical storm warning issued for the island. That's because the southern edge of the tropical storm force wind field, you can see it here in the forecast track from the National Hurricane Center, is already rather close to the island, and it's likely to make a very close pass to the island. And it's certainly possible that we do see tropical storm force winds over the night tonight and into early Friday. But beyond that, the strongest winds are still very close to the center, and those are forecast to stay offshore and not impact anybody directly. Now, as this continues tracking into the North Atlantic, it's going to be turning into a non-tropical cyclone. It will continue to broaden its wind field, which could mean some impacts for the southern coast of Newfoundland and Nova Scotia and southeast Canada, but the core impacts of the storm are forecast to stay as well south of you all, so we're not really expecting ultimate impacts there. And beyond this, the system is forecast to become a powerful non-tropical cyclone as it tracks further northeast and begins to impact Iceland by late this weekend or early next week. This is the storm surge forecast of water rises we could see in addition to what we've already seen with this storm. You can see from North Carolina all the way up to Long Island and New York. We could see a general rise of a couple feet above normally dry ground. And in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, we could see 2 to 4 feet of storm surge above normally dry ground take place there, as that's where the strongest offshore flow by this point is, though with the characteristic of this coastline with the Bay Area here, that does allow some stronger winds to come into the backside of the Outer Banks here. And we do, like I mentioned, still have a tropical storm warning, but also a storm surge warning in these areas where 2 to 4 feet is outlined there. And for the rest of the coast, the rip current risk is still high really along the entire U.S. East Coast, and this will continue really through Friday and Saturday. It does get a little bit better tomorrow over South Carolina and Georgia. That would be a case where I would look to the local weather office or lifeguard to say if it's safe to swim in the ocean. But conditions will continue to improve, especially across the southeast as we go into this weekend, and by, say, Sunday or Monday, it should be much safer to go swimming along the southeast coast especially, and days following that it will get better along the mid-Atlantic and northeast coasts. Okay, that's Hurricane Erin dealt with. We've now got Invest 90L behind it, now nearing the Leeward Islands. Now, this system has become much more convectively active over the past day. You can see that now, instead of a few sporadic bursts of convection, we now have a whole lot more disorganized convection taking shape across most of the wave axis. And I say wave axis because this is still a tropical wave axis. We have not really seen too many signs of this system closing off an area flow pressure. And we talked about how this system size was going to mean that it was going to take time for that to occur. And we still see on satellite imagery today a fairly broad trough axis with this tropical wave. We've got southerly winds on the eastern side of this convection turning into northerly winds as you head towards the Caribbean islands. And if you look south here, there's no real sign of winds coming out of the west, more just out of the east, highlighting that we don't really have westerly winds that would indicate a closed area flow pressure forming underneath of this convection. And this is going to be a continued gradual process over the coming days as this wave continues tracking northwest. The good news is here, like I've talked about the past couple of days, is that because of the broadness of this wave, rapid development is not going to occur really at all. And really the only impact that we can expect in the Leeward Islands over the coming days is heavy rainfall from this. Now, we did just have Hurricane Erin come through just north, and even though the core passed north of you all, we did have some flooding issues here. And so we could, for that reason, have an increased risk of some flash flooding, especially across some of the mountainous terrain in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. But apart from that, and maybe some gusty winds, we're not going to be dealing with a lot of too significant impacts with this system. This is a couple of ASCAT passes that we got to further confirm that we don't have those westerly winds on the south side of the wave axis. Now, it's kind of annoying. We got 2 half passes of the wave, but there's enough data here to kind of extrapolate the data in between. You can see on this pass from this morning, we have these southerly winds, southeasterly winds on the eastern side, and if we look at the other side of it, we have those winds turning more northerly or northeasterly on the west side of the convection. And you can see on the south side of all of this, I can scroll down and see even more, we see really no sign of those winds turning westerly. Though with time, especially with all this convection that we're now seeing with this should allow a gradual process of forming an area flow pressure. And models are now coming up again on the formation potential of this storm. We talked about yesterday how it's possible that once this system gets north of the Caribbean, once it's formed, the environment would be rather favorable for the system to intensify, alongside the ocean waters still being rather favorable. This system is going to be tracking a little bit further east than Hurricane Erin did, which was more in here. And we do have a cold wake of waters north of the Caribbean islands from Erin. You can see this here in the observed sea surface temperature map. There's a little bit of cooler water here just north of the Caribbean islands, and I'm sure it's even more off the US East Coast, but with that being much more recent, there's not a lot of observations to say exactly how cold those waters have gotten now. But the system is tracking further northwest, and it's going to be tracking more south of Bermuda, which is hard to see my pen here, but it's right about here on the map. And you can see that we have much warmer water that has been untapped so far this season, and the environment as well is going to be favorable for the system as it continues tracking towards the northwest. You can see right now we have an area of high pressure aloft. It is on the northern periphery of the wave, so there is a little bit of easterly flow aloft, but this being aligned with where the system is tracking in general means that we have light vertical shear aloft. And this pattern continues as we head into the forecast moving into the western Atlantic. And you can see by this time on early Sunday morning, 2 a.m. Sunday, we have an area of high pressure still draped on top of this tropical wave, which is now a tropical cyclone on the model by this point. And with this kind of favorable environment and the warm sea surface temperatures here, that will likely promote intensification. And we do see that happen on the model. You can see the red number here indicating pressure does lower, indicating intensification that does occur. And so this is going to be a concern to watch after Erin or Bermuda. As you can see on this model, this is getting rather close to the island by this point. And this seems to be a pretty locked in track by this point of coming north and threatening Bermuda out of any other possibility that we've talked about over the past few days. The first thing is Hurricane Erin here just off the US coast, with it making this hard right turn. It's setting a western edge on the subtropical ridge, which is going to cause the system to track north. You can see that happen here. They're showing you the low level spin, and Erin moves out of the scene. It sets a western edge on that ridge, and we see 90L come north of the Caribbean islands. This is by Saturday morning. And this is reinforced further by a new trough that's digging into the eastern United States by middle to later half of this weekend and early next week. And this is going to solidify this pattern of this trough being here and this ridge being here, which is a classic recurvature and guaranteed recurvature at that pattern for Invest 90L. There's no concern at this point of this system coming west and threatening land areas like the US or the Bahamas. Most models are in agreement with this pattern, which makes sense given these two features, that the system will be turning north of the Caribbean islands. But that does still leave Bermuda in the path of the system. And like I mentioned, the environment does look favorable for some intensification to occur. As again, we have this favorable environment. And alongside that, if we look at the broader view, we'll also probably have some help with some jet stream flow further north across southeast Canada. You can see that by this point, when the system is now coming into the far North Atlantic, we're now getting aid from this strong jet streak over the northeast US and southeast Canada. And if the system is positioned in a right way relative to this, it may allow the system to tap into this and intensify at a quicker pace, especially with this warmer water that we have here. So we'll need to keep an eye on this in Bermuda after Hurricane Erin passes through on Friday, just to show that we have some more model agreement as well. You can see the European is in a similar boat with the GFS showing a tropical cyclone pass very close to Bermuda by the latter half of the weekend and into early next week. Now, there's of course going to be some track uncertainty exactly how far west or east it is by this point. Those will be ironed out in time, but the main thing for Bermuda is to watch this behind Hurricane Erin. And of course, the National Hurricane Center is going to continue having outlooks on this, and once it does form into a tropical cyclone, they'll have advisories on that. And of course, the Bermuda Weather Service will also have updated local information for you all with the system as it tracks north. This is a current outlook from the National Hurricane Center. You can see high chance of development over the next 7 days from this tropical wave, 50% in the next 2 days. And you can see that general track here turning to the north, staying away from North America, but getting rather close to Bermuda by the end of this. And just to show you these two other areas of interest, this is Invest 99L, 40% chance of development, but you can see it's a very compact formation area for this, as the environment's going to get very unfavorable for this. And same with this other low in the central Atlantic, only a 30% chance, low chance of the system developing over the next, say, 12 hours that it has here. I also mentioned that we do have an area of interest now in the Eastern Pacific while we're here. This is a medium chance of tropical development in the Eastern Pacific, but the good news is here, at least for now, from what I've seen, this system is not likely to be threatening Mexico in any way. It looks like it may just be another one of those storms that forms out here and tracks into colder waters and dies out. That's all that I've got for today on both of these systems. I'll continue to have videos on 90L as it tracks northwest. Really won't talk about Erin all too much beyond this point, as it's beginning to turn non-tropical, and the impacts with this system are now dying down along the US East Coast and Bermuda. But having said that, stay safe in both of these areas and southeast Canada as Erin does pass by, bringing some tropical storm force winds in all likelihood to all of those areas. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.